Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Magnifique Pop Culture Caballeros with our special guest, Rob Vegas.
Hey everybody, this is Rob Vegas and I'm checking in from Melbourne, Australia. And of course, we are here with your good friend Johnny to talk about an all-time awesome favorite movie of ours called The Train, the 1964 action classic starring Burt Lancaster.
Brilliant
And
film.
yeah, I'd really like to thank Johnny for letting me join him on the show this evening. In case you were wondering, I'm all about great movies. And of course, if you've caught me on YouTube before, you may have seen me do some music videos in regards to guitar lessons and, of course, talking all things G.I. Joe. And yeah, we're doing a full circle round tonight as myself and Johnny are here to talk The Train. Take it away, sir.
Yeah. And with a name like Rob Vegas, I just assume you're a rock god legend and also a film lover.
Well, I have divulged the secret before, but why not let the cat out of the bag again? When I did play in a few bands, my friends and I always used to talk about going to Las Vegas and hanging out there like the Rat Pack, like Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and
Yep.
Sammy Davis Jr. And that was like all we talked about for ages. And then one night one of my buddies just goes, "Yeah, man, you're Rob Vegas," and the name stuck. So here we are, and a world exclusive for your show, my friend.
True Aussie style. Someone's giving you that name. It's
Absolutely,
stuck.
because if you
Yeah.
try giving yourself a nickname, it always ends badly.
Yeah, that's un-Australian. Someone else has got to give it to you.
Spot on.
Oh yeah. So we'll get into the
Oh,
film here. It's got the old MGM roaring lion.
yeah, this is an
I'm just,
absolute cracker of a film, isn't it? It is
it
like
is.
one that, yeah, like I try and share this with everyone I meet. I'm like, hey, you got to watch The Train, as it's absolutely stunning stuff.
But yeah, I miss seeing there's so much film studios that kind of gone bankrupt or mergers and all that, and all sorts of rubbish is coming out of the pipelines. I miss seeing these old classic Hollywood logos and sort of minimal credits and just a nice, cool sequence and music, and we're into the film.
Yeah, like this one throws you straight into the action. Like
It does.
there's no messing about because it's like here it Paris. Like obviously, given the events of course June 1944. We're only a few weeks out from that, and of course the bad guys, so I'm just going to call them that. I'm not going to refer to them as anything else. The bad guys are
Fair
just
enough.
trying to loot as much stuff as they can and take their spoils back to Berlin, back to home base. And this movie really, like, obviously there's only so much they can show, um, given the scope of things, but this really grabs the trophy in terms of the bad guys trying to grab all of the trophies of their spoils of war and get them out of town as quick as possible. And it's like
Yeah.
this lady the art curator. She's like, hey, this is the pride of France. Thanks so much for not letting it get bombed or destroyed. And then our mate Paul Scofield, who plays the antagonist of the movie, he just says, "You're welcome, but now I'm taking it." And he's just
Yeah.
legging it out of Paris. And it's such a wonderful setup, and it's done in such a quick time, and they show all of the boxes of the paintings as well, and they don't have to show the paintings, but they show just the
Yeah. All the
name.
crates.
Yeah, yeah. And like getting printed on each box, and it's like you don't see the paintings, but it's like, and that theme kind of goes through the whole film, like especially as the other characters get introduced and come into it. It's like we don't have to see the paintings, but we know they're there, and they almost
Yeah.
become a character in the movie. Like, yeah, what do you think about that one, Johnny?
Oh, that's a really good observation, man, because they do. I mean, other than the opening in the gallery they're walking through, once they're boxed up, you're right, you don't see them again. And there's various trains comings and goings through the small towns, and some of the people are skeptical of like going, oh, there's these priceless paintings, and then someone's like, no, no, it's just all the usual stuff they're stealing, and all the things have been ripping off the last 4 years. There's no paintings in there. Some people think it's just don't even believe it because they don't realize how that they're they're priceless historical paintings, but they're also this national culture and treasure that's part of the identity of the country and the history. And that's a theme that kind of gets repeated throughout the film. There's all this fighting and war and senseless stuff going on, but there's these higher values or ideals represented by the art. But it's like, well, why am I letting my men die for your pictures?
Yeah, yeah, and it seems, you know, like I said, the paintings, even though you never really see them, they become like this force of nature to be reckoned with.
Yes.
That our antagonist, Paul Scofield, and Burt Lancaster's character, it's like a confluence where they get drawn together by these things, and you never see them, but they're always certainly a tangible force that's
Yes.
driving the plot of the film. And these two guys just come to blows, and not and Paul Scofield's character is so driven by them, and at yeah, Burt Lancaster just gets just drawn into this web, and he sees all the sacrifices of all the other characters, and how much just madness almost goes into
Yeah, madness
preserving.
is the word.
Yeah, and yeah, just how much goes into preserving the culture of their country. And it's quite a journey that these boxes of crate, or these crates with names painted on them, take us on. And even though you never get to really see the contents, these boxes that are established as the opening credits um, roll through, it's like, this is the stuff, and it just escalates from there.
Yeah, and it starts off kind of. I mean, it takes you straight into the film, but then after that, it has kind of a casual, sedate pace, which I love of films from the kind of 50s through 70s, where you haven't got too many rapid cuts. You're taking time, you're seeing characters, there's good lighting, we're getting nice close ups on faces and seeing who these characters really are. Um, Burt, Ca- Burt Lancaster is La Biche, and forgive me if I butcher any French names. And Paul Schofield, as you said, is the bad guy, von Waldheim. He starts off kind of casual, but as the film goes on, we see more and more this obsessive quality of him, where it's like this almost like mania, where the events of the war in the real world almost seem to not even matter to him. He's just obsessed with these pieces of art, or whether it's owning them or hoarding them or protecting them from being destroyed, whatever it is, he's got this obsessive quality that we see play out through the film.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said, as like in the starting sequence, he's like, oh yeah, this is just something we're going to do. And then as each of the adversities arise to his, that just keep getting in the way, like all the obstacles,
Yeah,
as you mentioned,
there's
yeah,
so many
there's
obstacles.
mania. Yeah, the mania just takes his character and drives him to the point, of course, at the end of the movie, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But
Hmm.
like the allies are just around the next corner,
Yeah,
and him and the bad guys are, they're out of tricks. And of course he just still wants to find a way to get these boxes of paintings out of town, and regardless of the sacrifice or what it costs, even though the odds are like, the bat or the guys the good guys are just around the corner. And he yeah, still just obsessed and on a mission to take this stuff and like whatever it takes, he wants to have it for himself. And as you said, be it for hoarding or be it for his own appreciation, or be it to use as material to support the war effort of
Yeah,
his faction.
that's how he sells it to his superiors, as the monetary value of the art, when they kind of fob it off and say, "I don't, we don't care about this."
Yeah, exactly. And it's a fantastic setup, and the way that it drives Paul Scofield's character throughout. Like you could almost say he's could even be considered the main character of the movie, as he's the
Yeah, yeah,
guy
it's
who's
the most
on a
screen time.
mission.
Yeah,
And it's like Burt Lancaster and his uh comrades are almost peripheral players, but
yeah,
he's kind of the guy who's on a mission throughout the movie.
like
And
the underground.
and the French guys are the guys who are just doing what they can to stop him from taking their culture away, which is what those boxes of paintings represent to them. And there's one touching scene with one of the engineers where he talks about, like, he reminisces about this girl that he used to know, who was I think a model or something like that for one of the painters. And it maybe falls a bit flat on the person that he's talking to, but he reminisces about how that meant so much to him. And he's like, well, the hell if I'm gonna let these damn paintings get out of France,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's really touching stuff. And especially when you see the lengths that the characters go to stop their culture from being stolen, which is it's a hell of a story.
it is, and it's a pretty big thing too, where as a viewer watching the movie, it tells us at the start, well, this is 1944, so we know we're getting close to the end of the war and the Allies, etc. But for the characters living in the film in that time, or people in the real world, they didn't know when the war was going to end. They're hearing these rumors for weeks, if not months. Oh, they're just around the corner. I mean, they literally are just around the corner in this film. But people are just going, yeah, yeah, we've been hearing that since 12 months ago, whatever, and kind of not. But the towns are getting strafed and bombed like pretty much daily, and they're used to the horror and the craziness, everything's going on. So just before we move on to the next slide, I'll just briefly sum up what's going here for anyone who hasn't seen it. As we get introduced to our characters at the start, they, as you've already said, Paul Scofield takes these classic artworks he's been hoarding away, all of these priceless treasures of France, boxes them up, sends away on the train, and the whole sort of like mission, if you like, in the film is you've got getting from point A to point B. It's like not a road movie, but it's a train movie. We're trying to get the stuff out of France into Germany, and all along the way, the underground resistance and other people are trying to stuff them up and stop them. And like the engineers and other characters along the way all have their little tricks, their little things they do to, like the guy here, the engineer who's in the start of the film, has his coins and puts them inside like where the oil goes into to block the oil and to give it like a false damage to stop the train. But unfortunately one of the bad guys is onto his tricks, and then he ends up getting shot fairly earlier in the film. But we see that these guys are crafty and wily and have all sorts of tricks and things to do in plain sight to try and do a bit of subterfuge or delay things, or anything they can to try and like steal back a little bit of dignity and try and keep some of these cultural treasures inside of their country. And all the characters in the film are just like, they're so well developed, even if they only appear in brief scenes. Like this early engineer guy, you see, when you first see him, he's like telling a guy, this is how you do the oil on a train. You do this and you don't do this. And like you totally believe that guy's been doing this for probably decades, these trains, and the war's just going on in the background, and this guy is just like so world weary. You can see it in his face, and he just doesn't give a stuff about what's going on. He's just like, I'm the train, get on and let's go. It's like it's such a good character actor in this scene.
Yeah, agreed 100%. Like full credit to the folks who did the casting on this movie. As you mentioned there, Johnny, everyone, like the band of rebels, as it were, and the engineers, like you really get drawn into their story, and not a second is wasted, like establishing the characters. And
Yeah,
you know, as you said, they all know that liberation is just around the corner, and that the allies are on the way, and that the bad guys are going to get kicked out, but they've still
yeah,
got a tiger in the tank, as it were. And as you said, like these resources, where they want to draw upon everything they can to save their dignity and preserve the culture of France. And as you said, like they don't give them fancy makeup or anything like that. They're all covered in soot, and they're covered
yeah,
in
and grease, oil,
steam, and
and
yeah, and it really just takes you into these characters, and each one of them is absolutely memorable and fantastic in the band of rebels who uh, come together to save the day, and as it were. And it's a fantastic ensemble cast.
it is. And like each of the characters, there's no time wasted in establishing, showing you who they are. It's very matter of fact. They're moving along, doing things. There's not too much expositional dialogue. It's very brief, and then there's a lot of action. They're on the train, they're doing things, and some of the characters might be on screen a few minutes, stretched out through the film. Some of the characters don't even appear on screen. They're like, oh, so and so just died, and so just died before the film's even begun, sort of thing. And we get that there's a bit where Labiche says, we're down to 3 guys and used to have, I don't know, was it 20 or 30 or however many people they used to have, and they're down to these last guys, and then like, you want us to risk our lives now just for these pictures on this suicide mission? So he's kind of like a reluctant hero in the film, or a reluctant character. It's almost like he's like the side character to all the events that are going on, who kind of steps up and ends up foiling the bad guys all along the way, because he was only supposed to escort the train to a certain portion of the way and get off and go home. But the bad man from the start of the film, who's obsessed with the art, he sends home the regular driver after he executed the first driver. The next guy who steps up, he's like, "You can go home," and then he forces Labiche to drive the train. So you see the beginnings of his obsession and manipulations and that kind of scene.
Yeah, exactly. And every time, like initially, for probably the first third act, Labiche, he's like, or Burt Lancaster, he's like, yeah, I've done my bit. And then he sees, the others, like in the sacrifices that they make, and he gets drawn into it. And then, of course, Paul Scofield's character just almost becomes as obsessed with Labiche and where he is and what he's doing, and wanting him to drive that train, as he is the artwork. And he keeps getting drawn to Labiche. And of course, he has to fix the train, and he has to keep driving the train. And you can actually, as the movie goes on, Burt Lancaster's character Labiche you can see him getting more and more frustrated with it.
Yeah.
And he's like, just I want to take 5 minutes out in this hotel where he gets to hang out for a tiny bit. But even then, he's drawn into like a sabotage mission. And
Yep.
no matter what Burt Lancaster's character tries to do, he keeps getting drawn back to this train almost as much as Paul Scofield's character is,
Yes. Yes.
trying to get that train out of Dodge.
But yeah, goes forward really well into the scenes, as you said. They've got to move the train. We see. I get a little confused at the beginning of the film because we see so many trains going different directions. I lose track of which one is the one that we want to know about with the art on it, because we're in a kind of train yard, as it were, and there's different ones coming and going. We see some of the tricks that engineers and people are playing. They're switching tracks. They're just delaying the Germans just to kind of mess with them. And we see the kind of tactics that play out throughout the film they're going to do later on. Here they're kind of just monkeying with them and slowing them down. Later on, they're really pulling tracks apart and setting plastic and doing all kinds of every kind of dirty guerrilla trick in the book. But this part here leads on. We've had the oil trick with the coins, and the guy gets executed, the first engineer / driver, and it leads into Labiche is now having to drive the train over to the next town. And normally, because of the strafing bomb runs, you would go at night time, so you're less visible. But being the bad guy is like, I don't care, just go now, it's daylight. He's like, well, it's kind of suicide. We'll get shot at. It's like, I don't care, just go. So they get forced to go in broad daylight, which leads into having this awesome scene of this plane strafing them and shooting the heck out of the train. Such a great scene. And just the aerial photography. I mean, this is an upward shot, but it cuts away to other shots where it's like the point of view of the plane coming down. And there's amazing shots in the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And like they full on give that train the beans, and they have to stop it on a dime, like they are just like, we've got to get to this tunnel at full speed before we get shot to ribbons. And then the tunnel's only like 100 meters or thereabouts long, and they just give it all the juice that the train's got, and
full
then
steam, the shuttle like crazy.
Yeah, and they get into that tunnel, which is nothing at all, that the length of that tunnel, and then jam on the brakes, and there's this awesome character moment where they stop centimeters from the end of the tunnel, and being
so good.
And they're just all of them are just like look at each other, and you could probably hear there's this wonderful moment where they pull the whistle on the train, and just you could almost take that whistle like it would be echoing deafeningly in that tunnel, but it's almost like them exclaiming, like you could see one of them just going, ah, but it's this moment where you can really just see the guys, they're just like, what have we got ourselves into? But at the same time, they understand that they're on this mission to, get this train from A to B, and it's a wonderful character moment.
And I feel bad for the guys on the mission, the French, but also still feel bad in a way for the Allies, because the Germans are being the occupying force, or the bad guys. They're using the French to do things for them and risking their lives rather than lives of their own men, which is just despicable and horrible. So you feel like whoever wins or loses any of those scenes, it's just horrible either way.
Yeah, of course. Like the engineers and all the train guys, they're like caught between a rock and a hard place. And here they are just trying to move the train to the next station, and they're getting shot at by the Allies. And it's like, like what else can possibly go wrong, and everything for them, while they're trying to do the right thing as well.
It's spoiler alert, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really yep, sorry.
No, I was going to say, it's just such, like I mentioned, it's such a good character moment where you see the absolute frustration on these guys' faces, and they're just like, what the hell? Like, we're trying to, do the job here, and the good guys the good guys are shooting at us as well now. And yeah, it's such a well staged action scene, and also, as I said, like a plot point in regards to showing us this how much these guys have been through already, and what they're just soldiering on to do to help out where they can.
Yeah. And before we move on to the next one, I'll just kind of sum up what's going on each one here. So we've had the strafing run on the train. They've made it by the skin of their teeth into the tunnel, jammed the brakes on. They get into the next town. The Labiche is going to maybe have a little break in this hotel, as you've said. But the moment he gets in there, he's up on the roof. He's doing a little bit of parkour, French style, and leaping off, jumping around things. And him and his other mate do a little distraction. They basically set fire to one of the Germans' vehicles as a distraction. He gets into like the train office so he can use the like telephone or cable, whatever they had there to make some contacts through the communications rather through the underground. And the guy in the office ties himself up, which I love seeing that. He ties up just about all of himself, so to make it look like he was taking advantage of in that scene. And he manages to run all the way back to the hotel before the Germans know anything what's going on, thanks to distraction. They beat the heck out of the poor guy who was in the office and don't believe him, but he has real character of spirit and doesn't tell them a word about any of it, so they can't prove anything. And we see the first of a few close-ups of different maps, which are just basic line drawings. Well, you being in Melbourne, you're probably familiar with some of the old train lines over that way. I used to live in that state, and it's just a bunch of lines telling you this route's going here, this route's going there. But it's the beginning of some trickery where the underground have a bunch of false signs and other things to trick the bad guys about where the train actually is in the middle of the night, going into these different kind of like country towns. So we'll go on to the next one there. Yeah, here it is here where they're switching some of the signs.
Yeah, this is so cool. Like this whole sequence is the close-ups on the map, and then the amount of effort and stuff that the French resistance go to in this is outstanding, and
it's so organized too. But I mean, they've been doing it for several years, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, and the way that it's framed within the film and directed, it shows and not tells. It goes, okay, well, here's the close up on the map of this place, and then whoosh, here's where that place is. And to cut a long story short for the viewers here tonight, they send the train around in a big circle right back to pretty much point A where it began, using this clever ruse. And like there must have been hundreds of resistance people involved in doing it, and it's an amazing just act of defiance on the part of the French to just get this job done. And there's this one classic moment where they've got some French guys dressed up in German uniforms, and one of the bad guys on the train comes out and asks for a light for a cigarette, and he says to one of the French guys who's in disguise, he goes, "What do you think of Saint of Old?" Which, yeah, yep. And
doesn't want to give it away.
That's it. The bad guy thinks, oh, yep, this is the last stop in France before we head into, home territory. This is like we're on the home stretch here. And they're just like, nah. And it's such a clever little
I love
moment.
That scene. And I feel like for those guys in that scene, I'm like, don't do a Hogan's Heroes. Don't give it away by having a bad accent or being sloppy with your rifle or anything like that. The bad guys will pick up on and go, hang on. They'll pick up on just the littlest thing, and they just like cleverly goes, just doesn't say anything. I love it.
Yeah, it's such a good moment, and it's a really cool little scene, and it does the job for what it's meant to, and it's like a good wink at the camera, but at the same time, it thwarts the bad guys. Just such a simple little touch.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of summarize what's going on in the scenes here before we go on to the next one. So we've had our little bit of chicanery, bit of shenanigans with changing over the signs on the towers and other, like, coming into the train stations. More close-ups of the map showing us, the viewer, like what's going on. They think the train's gotten closer to their destination outside of France, back in the motherland, but in reality they have not. But they've fooled them because it's night time and they've done this sign switcheroo. And leads into some really nice cinematography and aerial shots here. We see the train in the daylight going over the bridge, and the scene where they uncouple one of the steam engines from the caboose and let it like run off, and then jump off and go sprinting off while the guys shoot at them. And it sort of hang on, sorry, we jumped ahead. I clicked my mouse by accident. It crashes into the town where the main guy is, and he's not too happy about it. He goes roaring over there in the bike and the sidecar, and they're sort of all called into action to fight the fires and clean up all the mess and stuff. And it's the beginning of some real carnage in this film. The first train fatality, I guess you would call it, because there's a lot of trains were sacrificed in this film. They get rammed into each other, or off the tracks, or into the towns. They're causing distractions, causing problems, all just delaying tactics to try and stop this artwork getting out of the country. And just fantastic cinematography and fantastic shots here, as well as all the character acting, the stories, and all that, and just awesome. And leads us into a next scene here, and I'll hand over to you, where they're telling where he's gone through all this madness, and then there's like, by the way, go and Clint Eastwood style, go and paint some wagons for us.
Yeah, and this another iconic scene where, of course, they've just gone to all of that effort of bringing that train round in a massive circle, which has taken hours and hundreds of people to help out, and they find out a lot of the collaborators in their ruse have been executed by the bad guys,
It's horrible.
and paid with their lives. And and I think you mentioned it before, Johnny, there's a lot of these collaborators that you never see in the movie, but they're mentioned off screen, and the body count is rising in order to stop this train. And Burt Lancaster's he's like, hey, I've just been shot in the leg, and he's apparently he'd injured himself like playing golf or something like that, and they actually wrote the scene where he got shot into it, because he was actually limping as part of this injury. Yeah, so they actually put that in the movie to explain why he was not 100% after that particular scene, or to just legitimize it and everything. But yeah, they think they're home and hosed, but of course the bad guys bring in a crane and everything to get this
they're so
damn
organized,
train.
like uncarnage the carnage.
Yes, they bring in a crane, they bring in hundreds of men to get this train with those paintings back on track. And Burt Lancaster's character, he cannot believe it, because he thinks, hey, we've just wrecked 3 locomotives. We've
wrecked all this
like
train.
hundreds of people are dead. What more can we do? And then the guys say, look, we've got a message from London. They're sending an airstrike, but the British and the US air forces are
And they want
going
you
to
to paint the
bomb.
bloody train wagons to mark them so they don't get blown up.
Exactly. And he's like, we've derailed the train, we've sabotaged the train, and now you want us to paint the train? And he just
And that look of
absolutely,
frustration, the futility, man, it's just perfect on his face.
yeah. And it's an amazing scene where he's just like, look, we've done all this already, and now you this on top of all of that. And
It's just like, it's
yeah,
insanity. It's absolute insanity.
yeah, and that sort of one line just really just shows the absolute madness of the situation. And they're like, if only we could just, sit back and chill and, wait for
Yeah,
the good guys to come over the hill. But of
yeah, because they
course,
know they're
the
coming, but they don't know exactly when.
yeah, and that that ticking clock, um, and of course the bad guys are, they're fully aware of the ticking clock as well, and they've thrown everything at this damn train to get it back on the
Yeah,
rails. And they, of course, our French resistance guys, they, at the very last minute, they don't want this train to be, shot and blown up and everything. And it's like, look, here's some paint, you got to paint the
they're very
train,
reluctant to
otherwise.
do it.
Yeah, because they don't, Burt Lancaster and his comrades, they don't want anyone else to die, and they don't,
And someone else
they
does
just,
die painting the train. It's horrible.
yes, the painting the train is takes its toll, yes, and but it saves the train so it can roll down the tracks another day, which
Yeah,
it does.
they do really well. They sneak up there in the middle of the night. They set off. I'm not entirely clear of the sequence, but I don't know whether the air raid is coincidental or they set it off so they could climb up on the train. But either way, the air raid siren's going off, and that's a distraction. So they can get on the train in the middle of the night. They've got these buckets of white paint, and they're splashing it out. Their body splashing and finger paint, and they're getting it everywhere as fast as possible. And they're actually 100% successful until one of the guys knocks a bit of something. I think it was like a roof tile or something falls down in front of the patrolling guy, and he looks up and he's like, "Someone's up there," and he's like, "Turn the lights on," and that's when they figure out they're up there. And Labiche has like a machine gun. He shoots a couple of guys, and he's like, "Get down, get down!" They all scramble off the train, and they get off and they're alive. But one of the guys climbs back up and goes back to painting. He's like, "Get down!" And that's what. This is a very telegraphed moment. You know that guy's going to die once he goes back up there, and of course he gets shot, and it's horrible, but it's dramatic and showing that how just utterly futile this crazy mission is. So they do all the
Yeah,
painting. They get um, during the
and
daytime, the bombers come flying over, and the bad guys realize that no bombs were dropped in the strafing run, and they realize they was trying to scrub all the paint off. And he's like, "Hang on, it's marked so they won't bomb it. Leave the paint on because we want to try and steal all this artwork, get the train back on the road." And Labiche has gone down further ahead by himself now down the road. Eventually, he does a scene with plastique charges, but the bad guys, knowing that he's out there, put all these hostages on the front of the train, knowing that he'll see them, won't want to blow up his own, countrymen. And so he does a combination of things. He does some plastique in one scene, and the other scene he just manually smashes some of the pegs and the rails out from the tracks as well. And but as it goes from like, here's this bad guy who's obsessed with the art, to now he's putting all these human hostages on the front of the um, train, knowing that they're just there as a deterrent, but they could die, and he does not care about them. We see down the bottom here, Labiche is sliding down the hill. He's picked up this like kind of T tool thing to undo the kind of couplings and screws and whatever in the train tracks, and he's like bashing them apart with a hammer style. But he leaves them sitting in there, so when the train comes along, because he does the plastique and doesn't want to kill the guys, but they repair it again. Then it leads into he undoes them, so when the train comes on, the weight of the train just pushes all the parts off and it sinks down into the gravel. And here we've got the poor guys that have been at gunpoint marched up to be hostages on this train here, showing that the guy who's the bad guy is not just despicable, he's obsessive and just a horrible human being to do this.
yeah, absolutely. And with uh, Burt Lancaster, he did his own stunts on this movie.
Oh, nice.
So that bit where his character rolls down the hill, like it might
I've done that in real
seem,
life. I have
yeah,
been bushwalking. I've done that down a hill like that.
yeah, I think we've all done that.
Yeah.
But there's
If
quite a
you've grown up
memorable
Australia
sequence.
and New Zealand, you've probably done that.
Yep. There's a memorable sequence early in the film where there's a bombing raid on one of the train yards, and the train is legging it out of there at full beans, and Burt Lancaster runs across the scaffolding, slides down this ladder, and jumps on the train while it's
Yeah,
moving,
he really
and
like
he
goes super fast down that ladder. It's amazing.
Yeah, so he flat out did, all or for the most part that I know of, pretty much 99.9% of these action
Nice.
sequences, you're getting Burt Lancaster on the screen, and that's him doing it Aussie style, rolling down that hill.
Yeah.
And that adds like that extra sort of, kick in the butt in terms of realism and authenticity to this show. And
I love
again,
that. The old school Hollywood actors usually had a certain level of fitness. I mean, a number of them went to actual war, of course, as well. But they usually had a certain level of fitness, physicality, as far as doing stunts and stuff themselves.
Yeah. Well, this brings us to the denouement, or the climax of the movie, of course.
Yep.
As the train, as you said, Burt Lancaster has sabotaged the rails, and the train sinks into the ballast, and it can't
Yeah, and that top image
reverse.
there, it's sinking right into the gravel as the rails come off.
Yeah, it's toast. That train is not going anywhere, and like all these, there's like a convoy of German bad guy vehicles coming down the road that's adjacent
They're
to the
heading for the
tracks.
hills. They're like, "We're going home." It's all over.
Yeah,
All over Red Road.
Paul Scofield's character goes up to the convoy, and he's like, dude, get my train fixed. And they're just like,
Yeah.
nah,
These
man.
guys are
And
like,
then
"Get out of it."
and all of his men who were accompanying him, that he was commanding, that were guarding the train, they all just like get out of Dodge as well. They hop on the
Yeah.
trucks in the convoy, and they just leave
Mhm.
him with the train. They're just like, nah, man,
Great scene.
we are just not having a bar of this anymore. This has gone too far. And that is the point that sort of leads us to the like the showdown between Paul Scofield and Burt Lancaster, where there's piles of, there's so many people that have died because of this train, and so much
Yep.
carnage and mayhem. And of course the bad guys couldn't take those guys that were hostages with them and had them
No, they couldn't
executed.
physically carry them, so they just left there like dead cattle.
Yeah, and it's like, well, how much is this train worth? And
Yeah. What's the ultimate prize?
yeah, and Paul Scofield's character, he's just like, well, this artwork, the potential of it, and it means nothing to just a simple railway man like Burt Lancaster's character Labiche. And then
Or the engineer there at the start that they make fun of.
yeah, and then there's this simple moment where Labiche just turns around, and he looks at the dead bodies and all the carnage and the mayhem, and he doesn't say anything. He just looks at it, and he's just like, man, you can just really feel like it's like this kick in the guts, and it's like, well, was it really worth these people and all of the
Yeah.
mayhem that's and of course he responds in kind, I guess you could say, in terms of the ending there, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but yeah,
Well, it's
he
coming up next slide anyway.
responds. Oh, okay. There we go.
But yeah,
Yeah.
like you've really hit the nail on the head there, man. This scene is just, I mean, the scene is so good. You see his true obsessional qualities coming out. Where okay, maybe he's an art connoisseur, and maybe he's got some noble qualities at the start of the film, where he's preserved these priceless works of art, this cultural heritage, and whether it's for selfish reasons or whether it's because he genuinely thinks it should be looked after, we don't really know. But as the film goes on, his obsessional qualities come out, And near the start, the superiors don't even want to ship the art, but he insists on it. He argues with them in an intellectual kind of way and gets the approval signature from a superior to get it shipped. Argues for the merits of the value of the art rather than the cultural heritage, which he knows is the true value of it, as an appreciator of the artworks themselves. But this scene here, we've got so many things going on. The bad guys are leaving, running away from the Allies are coming in just over the horizon. It's the end of the war. He stops this convoy and is like, right, I'm going to hijack this convoy and you're going to load up my art. And they're like, mate, the war's over. We've had a gutful and we're going home and you can deal with your own mess is pretty much their sort of attitude. And you get it when you see these guys come up, they're so world weary. They're so like, they've been all these battles while this guy's been sitting around sipping tea and looking at works of art, like, you know, and just enjoying himself. And they're just like, don't want to have nothing to do with it. So they're going in one direction, he's going the other. And instead of jumping on the convoy with the other soldiers after the train's all stuffed, he goes, no, I'll stay here with the train, with the art. And it's like, why? You're either going to die or be captured by the Allies. That's completely senseless. But you get this real obsession. It really plays out in the scene. As you said, it leads into Labiche, comes to inspect the train. He's carrying one of those, I think it's, what do they call? I'm not a firearms guy. I think they call it like a grease gun or something like that from World War II. He's carrying the gun there, like machine gun. Checking out the train leads into the final moments of the film and has a showdown with Scofield. And Scofield's like, you know, pretty much like, well, you've got what you want. You've stopped your train. And it's like, you're just praying. I'm like, just shoot this guy, man. Just shoot this guy before the credits. Do not let him walk away.
Yeah, and it's and just the silence after the that confrontation, and you can just sort of hear the train itself. You can hear the train dying, like it's still sort of letting out its last chuffs in silence. Like there's no, like after Burt Lancaster walks away from the train, yeah, you just hear it still chuffing and kind of itself dying as a character as well. And then yeah, the credits roll up and yeah, you're just left to think about it. And what an ending to like this fantastic
amazing ending.
Yeah. And yeah, like these two characters have been just fighting against each other, and you know, the whole movie, and this is what it comes to. And of course, there's the cost of the train in terms of, you know, the people that have you know, sacrificed their lives, or you know, had their lives taken from them by no fault of their own, in terms of the hostages, and you know, even many of the bystanders and people along the way of the voyage of this train. And yeah, I think, as you said, it sums it up so well, where like the German convoy of the bad guys comes down the road, and there's that guy who's like, just let's get the hell out of here, man. And
Yeah.
he's
You can
been
see that on his face. They've been through all this combat and stuff, and they're just like, we've got to go. Why you stop wasting our time?
yeah, and even there's like a second in command guy who's been loyal to Paul Scofield's
Yeah, and even
character
he's
through.
like, enough of
He,
this.
yeah, he's almost like, you know, the conscience of that Paul Scofield's character should have had, and he's
Just
just
the
like,
humanity of like the sanity and humanity of like, no, this is a crazy situation and a crazy man at this point. We need some sanity to come in here.
yeah, it's really just amazing stuff, and a hell of a thing to behold. And yeah, and yeah, you're left with that sort of silence, as I said, where the train's just letting out its last, you know, chuffs until, you know, it runs out of, you know, steam and
Like
everything
a
like
beat of the
that.
heart, just
Yeah, and that's like the sort of, you know, what the movie leaves you with. It's like, well, yeah, and it's a really, enough of the heavy stuff. this is an absolute cracker of a fantastic film, Johnny, and I really thank
It
you for
is.
the
It is.
opportunity to talk about it, because
I
like I
thank
know
you.
we
I'll gladly talk to you about films anytime, man. You're
yeah, no,
top
all
dude.
good, my friend. But yeah, this one it's one I saw, I think back in for the first time, I think back in 1991. It was on TV late at
Nice.
night, and it was like, oh wow, this is awesome. And you know, and I've revisited it many times. And when I first saw it on DVD, I was like, yeah, let's grab that and get back into it again. And it's one, it's like something that gets popped on quite a bit at my place. Is it's fantastic, and it's something that is that I really appreciate about it is, of course, the black and white photography, as it lends this
Yeah,
real.
it's so nice, man. It's so the stunning contrast of the foregrounds, the backgrounds, the shadows, the lighting, seeing the characters' faces. I mean, that's one of the reasons I chucked up this image here. See how his face is lit, it's all greasy. He's got his hair and he's got the overalls on. There's so much beautiful, like kind of like still moments and photography and the all the black and white contrast, and this is so good.
Yeah, because by the time this came out, it was 1964. It was,
Yeah, yeah.
becoming more the exception than the rule that films would be in black and white. So
Yeah, you can
whoever it
watch some John Wayne
was,
colors and some John Wayne black and whites in that same era. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and like whoever it was that signed off on the black and white film stock, I mean, they deserve a pat on the back, as it really
For sure.
adds that extra grittiness, and as you said, the
Oh, it
oiliness
does so
and the
much.
grime and the all of that. And at some points, it gives you that documentary sort of feel as well. Especially
Yeah,
there's like
I
a
kinda
bit.
like how the black and white shows, also, um, there's all these different people in the film. You got French, we don't really see the Americans other than strafe bombing, you got the bad guys, but it kinda just shows they're all just human beings on a playing field, and there's all this different shenanigans going on, and the focus is on the characters more than the faction. The war's in the background, we're seeing this little character drama and these little trying to get the train point A to B. They're focusing on the human side of it, not on, well, this guy's on this side and he's from this country and he's wearing this. All the military regalia is there, it's on screen, but it's not without the color. We're focusing on the humans and the faces, not on the uniforms and the colors and who's in what army and all that business.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it certainly isn't short on spectacular action. And like there's
Phenomenal
massive.
action.
Yeah, yeah. The action is there, and the suspense and the ticking clock, which shows up quite a bit. And yeah, the I think yeah, the black and white filming adds like an extra tension to it, and it adds like
It does.
a
It's
real
beautiful.
claustrophobia. Almost like
Mm.
it puts you right in there, and it yeah, it draws you in. It's almost hypnotic at times. It's really great.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's a great classic film, and um, we'll finish up our talk here, but I will say publicly also I'll happily talk to you about classic films all day, man. If you want to talk about other stuff, whether it's about trains or cowboys or detectives and gumshoes, whatever, I'm happy to talk about other classic films.
Oh, likewise, Johnny. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, I see. I'm just looking at the clock there. We've been talking for a while
Yeah,
about this, and I'm
yeah,
sure we could
yeah. I'm watching
probably
the little counter up in the corner, so we could wind up. We could wind up.
yeah, no, I'm sure I'm sure given the chance we could probably talk about this one for another couple of hours. But
Yeah,
yeah,
easily,
and
easily. I
many
did. We
others,
did the
Johnny.
close today. But yeah,
Yeah, well, for the sake of the
yeah,
viewers, we might wrap it up. But no, many
yeah. We'll
thanks
wrap it.
again for having me on the show. And yeah, what are you up to, and what's happening out in the YouTube land and Facebooks and all those places for you there, mate?
Oh, nothing too exciting. Like we did. Yesterday did a talk with Boba Hicks. That's Mark over in Ireland on Streets of Rage 2 from the old Mega Drive. To talk on that.
Cool.
Um, coming weeks, we've done WrestleMania 1 and 2. We're going to do WrestleMania 3 talk. I've got going to be doing one with the guy named Goji Tron. He's a big old toy collector in the toy circles. Talking about the Incredible Hulk, some of his favorite comics. So there's a few things on the burner or back burner. Got a Lethal Weapon movie talk coming up for another fellow too, in our kind of circles of toy collecting mates and all that.
Awesome.
But yeah, we'll
sounds
finish up
great.
here, and I'll play a little clip if you want to say goodbye to the folks.
Thanks, everyone, and stay tuned, and we'll see you soon. Cheers, everybody.
Yep. Catch you next time.